Hello everyone, this is your girl Miss Angie, and we are back into the series of I didn't put God first in my relationships. I didn't include God in my relationships. So far this is the third video on this series, and I kind of just, the first two videos was kind of just talking about the introduction of what this is going to look like and the foundation, and now we're going to start getting into more about me, more about some of the things that I have encountered when it comes to relationships and how I didn't include God into my relationships in life. Not only romantic relationships, but I even feel like friendships later down in life. So, you know, I really felt like this was a good series to talk about, and here we are. So this video is going to be basically talking about young love, starting off in the young love phase. And if we know, we've all have been there before, where we have this moment of young love, whether it was in middle school, high school, you felt like you had a little crush in elementary school. We all have had that moment of young love. Even when you start college, you know, that's still the young stages in your 20s. We all have had a moment of young love. So I felt like this was just the best way to start after talking about, like I said, the foundation. And when you're young and you feel like you like someone, or you feel like you have interest, and of course you really don't know what love is when you're younger. You have an idea of what you think it is, or what you have heard what love could be. But you know, it's always that young love. So for me, it was funny because I actually felt like I had a crush or someone I was really into in first grade. That's kind of how it started for me. First grade, I thought I had this little crush. We used to sit there, watch movies in my first grade teacher's class and stuff like that. And it was like, oh, he's cute, you know, little stuff like that, right? Now, it's funny because before I even get into it, it's funny because a lot of people say you can't count, you know, I'm not saying count a elementary relationship by all means, no. But you can't count, you know, young relationships. And I feel like to a certain extent you can count it, because there are a lot of relationships that started as a high school love and they ended up getting married and they ended up having kids. I know people who was in my high school, because I went to two different high schools, and I know people from high school in general who married, had kids. Some of them went into the army and started their families, and some people, you know, already jumped in right after high school into their fields and stuff like that and started these families. So I feel like, yes, we can say that young relationships can happen when it comes from, you know, high school sweethearts. I feel like that is possible. So I will say that in some way or form, these young relationships do count. But anyways, getting back to me. Yeah, so I qualified, you know, a first grade, you know, crush, or thought he was cute, blah, 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 right? And then as you continue to get older, it was like, I don't know, for me, I knew I was different as I would probably say, maybe 4th or 5th grade and getting into, you know, middle school. I knew I was different. I knew that I wasn't by far anywhere near popular. I knew that. But in between my journey, I did have, you know, boys that be like, you know, kind of interested, thought I was cute, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. My real relationship started, what was that, 6th, 7th grade. I want to say 6th and 7th grade was when that relationship for me started. And so I'm not going to name names. I'll just, you know, use abbreviations. But this guy that I was talking to, his name was JW. That was considered my real first relationship. And it was crazy because I had the initial starting point of, this is what it's going to be. I'm a Christian girl. I'm not about kissing. I'm not about all of these different things. We can talk. You know, I think at first I was kind of nervous to have a boyfriend, even though we kind of started off as friends at first in middle school and whatnot. But I think I was more nervous of like saying I had a boyfriend around that time. I knew my dad was not gonna have it. So when my family did finally meet him, that was always known as my friend, but that was my boyfriend later down the line, right? So middle school was that relationship. I ended up finding out, probably when I got into high school, his real age. That was a big, yeah. He was older than me by a few years, and I didn't know it. So I was dating this guy in middle school who was actually older than me. I found this out when I finally got into high school, because when I got into high school, that's when me and his relationship kind of started to get rocky. Can't really go into detail with dates, but that's what it was. But overall, that relationship was my first relationship, and he taught me how to drive, which could probably also be an indication of age as well, which we're not gonna get into that. I'm just being honest with my story, right? He taught me how to drive, me to different things that I was, didn't know as far as relationships. He would always write letters and things like that when we were in middle school. And we would go to movies, we would go out to eat. Back then, Ryan's and Ponderosa's was the popping thing. But yes, my cousins, all of us, we would all hang out at on my back porch, or they would come over, and we would always go to the library. And so it was just a very young love relationship, right? So I would say the shift started to happen, like I said, going into high school, when I found out how old he was. And then we kind of parted ways in between that. He was going to another school and dealing with his own personal issues at that time. And I was kind of looking for a change. So I'm going to, because I want to leave these videos short, but what I want to say is that relationship was a relationship that kind of opened the door to me understanding, like, oh, okay, I like the fact of being in a relationship. I like the fact of getting notes. I like the fact of getting stuff for Valentine's Day. It was that young love bond. There was also that pressure, as well as being a Christian, of like, I'm not trying to kiss. I'm not trying to do anything sexual, which there was no, we never got that far in our relationship, other than like kiss, hug, and just that kind of like jump start. There was talks about that next step, or in between those next steps, and different things, but it never went that far. So, but I like the fact of, because like I said in the beginning, I was really nervous by me being a Christian and this whole thing of like having a boyfriend at that age and at that time, and later on really being my boyfriend and everything. But I would say that was the start. That was the start to like, I want to be in a relationship even more. The fact that this relationship lasts for most of my middle school years. And for the most part, the relationship was fun. Like I said, we did a lot of stuff as far as just stuff that young kids do. But the breaking of that, I think, knowing that his age, some of the things that started to shift and change. Overall, he was a cool person. He was a good person. We actually, what was funny was we actually had a pretend wedding, which I cannot forget about that. We actually had a pretend wedding and we got married. It was funny. It was just funny. It was just like in my friend's basement, planning this whole little wedding and stuff like that. Talked about kids, the whole young love. Like, it was just legit young love. And it's funny because I can't believe I almost forgot about that, and I knew I needed to mention that. But young love, definitely, just, I knew for me, it was like the start of wanting to be in more relationships. And I'm like, well, knowing that I want to be married and everything, I'm like, this is kind of like the start. But we did break up. We kept in touch off and on as far as like friendships, and then it just got to the point where we were both in two different spaces, and that was pretty much the end of that. But it was funny too, just talking about this relationship that I was in middle school. My mom had ended up finding a box at the house full of old letters and things that I had from high school, middle school letters that he had wrote. And I came across some of my old journals, which is crazy because I was a SpongeBob fan. And another old journal, look at how outdated this is. But I had came across like letters and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff I had ended up throwing away because yes, and you know, this was just stuff that you look back at and was like, wow. So anyways, I'm going to conclude on this relationship portion as we go into different relationships, kind of talking about them and everything. But for me, this relationship was definitely not something I asked God for, especially knowing when I found out his age. But at the same time, it was definitely a stepping stone for me in relationships. But it was not a relationship where God was like, this is a relationship you should be in. But I want to also make mention of the fact that a lot of these relationships when you're younger, you just want to be free, have fun, enjoy, right? You're not thinking about praying at that moment of what you should have, even though I should have, especially growing up and having that background where I should have been probably praying. But in middle school, you're young. So you have to give yourself some grace when it comes to that young love portion, which I will get into the next video more on my high school relationships. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this portion of the video. I will talk to you later.